Am I watching YouTube, or is YouTube watching me? I'm going to share with you a little story, something that happened to me about 6 months ago now. It's played on my mind a little bit ever since. It was a surreal and strange experience. Perhaps it was nothing. Perhaps it was nothing. I'm going to share it all the same, and you can make up your own mind. It was just an ordinary day. Nothing out of the ordinary at all. I'd done some work in the morning, had my breakfast, done my usual things. At lunchtime I decided to go out for a walk. Again, it's nothing out of the usual. It's just something I like to do every now and then. I took the dog with me around one of the estates, and then we walked the beaten path, which has fields either side of it. There's horses in one side. On the other side there's sometimes sheep, sometimes it's empty. We were just walking along, minding our own business. I saw the weirdest thing looking out into the field. In the empty field to the one side of me, I saw what looked like a white figure. I had to take a second take. There was no one around. We'd walked quite far, and we were all alone. It staggered me for a moment, and then I realised it was just a fallen scarecrow with a bag which must have just blew over into it. It just gave it the appearance of some kind of leaning, apparitional white figure. Again, this is nothing really out of the usual, but what follows, I think, kind of is. Now, this is just one of them experiences which we all have, these weird things which happen. They turn out to be absolutely nothing, which, as I say, this was indeed a distant, faraway scarecrow with a white plastic bag over it. I returned home, went about my day. When I was having a cup of tea later on that day, probably mid-afternoon, I was scrolling up and down YouTube, like we all probably do, and probably how you found this video in the first place. It didn't take me long to come across the thumbnail which looked oddly familiar. It was a field with a white figure in it. I stopped scrolling instantly. This was just weird, right? The same day, the exact same day, it was almost like a screenshot from my mind. Now, again, there's probably just an odd explanation for this. I'm sure there is. But at the time, I just thought, Jesus fucking Christ. Is someone in my mind? I don't know, that sounds crazy. Sure, it sounds crazy, right? But some of the technical advances we've had over the last few years, wouldn't they seem crazy 100 years ago? They really would. They really would. And if you look back a few more 100 years ago beyond that, they would look at some of the technologies we've had now and they would see it as completely alien. And we know for a fact that most of the technologies and scientific experiments that we have are kept under wraps, behind closed doors, and they're only ever released to the public when they're profitable, when they can make money out of it, or when they can help further the divide between people. The thumbnail said, "Have you seen this figure?" How obscure is that? Have you seen this figure? I clicked on the thumbnail. Of course I did. It turned out just to be some nonsense episode of the really early, possibly the original Doctor Who's, where some white figure pursued Doctor Who, never had a speaking line. It was just some obscure, unsolved mystery, I think. Now, this was a complete nothing video to me. I've never watched Doctor Who. When I was a little boy, I would have seen some of the episodes. They would have been on the family television when I was playing with my action figures downstairs. My parents would have been watching it more than I. So the video had no interest to me other than the thumbnail and the title to the thumbnail, which just freaked me out. Now I know this video is ultimately going nowhere. If you were looking for some kind of answer, intrigue or mystery, there's really none here. It's literally just a normal, ordinary guy. Went for a walk one day, saw something weird, returned home, and that weird image struck in his mind, stood out as a thumbnail to him when he scrolled through YouTube. You got to admit this is either some odd coincidences or it's oddly bizarre. It's sat in my head, I can still remember the thumbnail very clearly. It's almost identical to the image, as I've repeated myself, I know. And this has me thinking. When it's late at night and I'm scrolling on my phone, am I watching YouTube? Or is it watching me? So many cameras everywhere now. All our lives are documented and recorded. Sometimes I start to wonder, are my thoughts even my own? Is everything, my entire life, just completely programmed? And on that note, I will try to sleep. And if you're up late, perhaps you'll see this thumbnail and it'll remind you of something that you've seen through the day. And you'll ask yourself the very same question. Am I watching YouTube? Or is YouTube watching me?